Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk a little bit about this project. We call it the Compassion Compass program. Um, and to get us started, we're going to talk really briefly a little bit about mental health following a dementia diagnosis. And then we'll go in and I'll introduce you to the Compassion Compass program. That's where we'll spend most of our time today. I will walk us through kind of an extended analogy to let you get a sense of what this program is that I'm talking about and that we are using to support mental health among individuals living with dementia. And then we'll transition to talking a little bit about the findings, about how has this program been received among individuals with dementia. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. All right. So first of all, around 7 million people in the US have a dementia diagnosis, and we also see a lot of research showing that this number it has grown a lot over past decades, and it's predicted to continue to grow with the number of adults who receive a dementia diagnosis each year. And nearly 40% of individuals with dementia report experiencing heightened depression and anxiety. We also have heard from both caregivers and individuals with dementia that there is a lack of emotional support after receiving a dementia diagnosis, and many describe that process as being a cold clinical process that left them feeling really lost and without support or resources for what do I do next? How do I move forward after I've received this life-altering diagnosis? So, to address this, we developed the Compassion Compass program. And this is a program that was created with a team consisting of a gerontologist, clinicians, as well as ACT researchers. Um, and essentially, what we did is we used acceptance and commitment therapy principles to create a single session digital mental health intervention. So that means it's something that can be done fully online in a single sitting. Um, that and the aim of this program is ultimately to improve quality of life for adults with dementia. All right, so first, what is acceptance and commitment therapy or ACT? ACT is a third wave behavioral therapy. So that means it's stemming from cognitive behavioral therapy, which many of you have likely heard of. But the focus with ACT and these newer therapeutic approaches is more on changing a person's relationship to difficult thoughts and emotions rather than trying to just reduce symptoms. And the effectiveness of ACT is supported by over 1,000 randomized control trials, and it is used by therapists around the world to help individuals live a more meaningful life filled with the things that matter to them personally. And so even when you might be experiencing a difficult uh, circumstance such as a dementia diagnosis, ACT can help you navigate those difficulties, give you skills to still find more meaning and joy and a higher quality of life, even in the midst of really challenging circumstances. It does this by trying to increase psychological flexibility. And this really simply is the ability to notice thoughts and feelings without getting stuck in them. So even when you are experiencing a lot of anxiety or a lot of stress, maybe a lot of sadness and grief, you can still choose actions that bring you closer to the things that matter most to you. In this little figure, we see that there are kind of six tenets of psychological flexibility. And as we walk through the Compassion Compass program, I think you're going to see how this program hits on a few of these tenants and teaches some skills that are really helpful. So you'll notice, for example, cognitive diffusion. This is being able to observe your thoughts without being ruled by them. That's one of the things that in this example we're going to walk through a little bit, how we can recognize our thoughts and feelings and then still make decisions, regardless of what we're feeling in the moment. Okay. So consistent with this act-based approach, the Compassion Compass program isn't trying to get rid of the thoughts or feelings that come along with a dementia diagnosis. Rather, its goal is to teach skills that help us navigate thoughts and feelings in a way that protects and supports our quality of life. And so today I'm going to start by walking us through an extended analogy that illustrates a couple of the skills taught in this program. All right. So, throughout the program, we use this analogy of a forest where adjusting to a dementia diagnosis can feel a lot like walking through a forest. And it may feel like, you were on this particular path in your life that you liked and that was comfortable and nice, and then suddenly something knocks you off of that path. And it can feel like you've lost your sense of direction in life, and now you're somewhere different and scary that you don't know that how to get out of or how to navigate. Um, and through ACT or this program, we're helping you find the skills that can help you get back onto your personally chosen path. And I say personally chosen path because everyone's path looks different. And our goal is not to tell you where your path is or what it should look like. Rather, the goal is to give you tools that can help you get back to living a life filled with meaning and the things that matter most to you personally. So, to start, we're going to do a little activity to help us get our bearings. So I want you to take a moment and just look away from the screen and look at the space around you. Take a moment, choose something, and just look at it a bit more carefully than you usually do. And I want you to try to notice one small thing that you maybe haven't noticed before. So I'm just going to be quiet for about 30 seconds and let you do that. All right. Thank you. So you may have noticed something like the color of a piece of furniture or the shape of a shadow, or maybe it was a small feature on your phone or computer or the way the light is reflecting in your room. Um, Whatever you notice, this is what we're going to be doing in this example today. We're going to be looking at things a little bit more closely, but this time, instead of looking at the space around you, you're going to be looking a little bit closer at what's inside of you and what you are thinking and feeling. All right. So, looking at our own thoughts and feelings can be a lot more difficult than trying to just observe the space around us. Um, and so, to help throughout the Compassion Compass program, we get to know several different characters. And here on the screen, I have an example of Jeff and the emotions that he recognizes when he tries to look inside, to look a little bit closer at what is going on inside of his mind and his body when he thinks about his dementia diagnosis. So, when thinking about his diagnosis, Jeff thinks, I can't believe I'm dealing with this. He notices feeling angry at his situation and wishes that everyone would just leave him alone. Jeff also notices a tightness in his chest when he has these feelings. Okay, so now we're going to give this a little try. And I want you to identify something that causes distress in your life, whether that is a dementia diagnosis or something else that often comes up for you personally. And then we're going to spend the next 60 seconds to just simply notice all of the different thoughts or feelings that come up. So I'm going to start this timer and we'll just sit here and look a little bit closer at those thoughts and feelings. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to just notice your experience. Before we move on, I do want you to write down one or two of the things you felt or thought um, as you reflected on this difficult um, challenge or thing that you are going through. We're going to come back to this in a few minutes, so either, type it into your phone or jot it down on a piece of paper. I'll give you just another um, few seconds to do that. All right. And then before we continue digging into whatever thought or feeling you noticed, I do want to remind you and emphasize that there are absolutely no right or wrong feelings to have. That feelings are not, you know, good or bad, right? Some are going to be more comfortable to experience than others, and then some are going to be a lot more uncomfortable. But there isn't any right or wrong feelings to have about something. All right. Okay. So when we think about difficult things, sometimes it can feel like our thoughts are pushing us around a bit. And some of you may have noticed this as we just spent that minute listening to our thoughts. You may have also noticed an inner voice. This inner voice can sound different depending on what's going on in our lives, and what we're thinking about. Sometimes that inner voice might be friendly, or sometimes it might be critical, confusing, or distracting. It may feel like a megaphone in your head, always making announcements, some of which are helpful and some of which aren't very helpful. Um, so, for example, some of you might have noticed thoughts like, why do I feel this way? Or this should be easier, or I should just give up. Or you may have thoughts like, I'm at peace, or it's going to be okay. You may have also noticed some feelings or emotions that were a little bit more difficult to put into words, such as possibly a sense of dread, a feeling of numbness or emptiness, or maybe feelings of grief over how your life used to be or how you would like it to be. These thoughts and feelings are often accompanied by physical sensations that you may have noticed, like possibly feeling lightheaded or shaky, or maybe a little bit queasy, tightness in the chest, or maybe feeling weak and fatigued. We're going to keep going through some of these difficult thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Or sorry, when we are going through these sorts of feelings, they can start to feel overwhelming. And when you're having all of these thoughts and these bodily sensations that aren't comfortable, it can become very difficult to focus on anything else. So going back to the forest analogy, we can compare this experience of this overwhelming, emotional and thought, all of these internal sensations feeling really overwhelming. We can compare this experience to being lost in a forest. So on this picture, I have a few of the thoughts and feelings that I have experienced when I'm going through a difficult challenge. And this image may feel familiar to a lot of you. Receiving a dementia diagnosis or other difficulties that we face in life, it can feel like just being dropped in the middle of a dark forest that's swarming with danger and terrifying possibilities of, what's going to come next. Um, so I want you to take a moment and look back at the feeling that you wrote down earlier. I'm guessing that most of you wrote down a thought or a feeling that is uncomfortable. Um, so when you're in the thick of this again, it's like being lost in the forest, like you don't know which direction to go, or like you might just want to get back to how things used to be. You want to get out of that forest and you want that problem to go away so you can go back to a place that's comfortable and familiar. And so for many of us, the first instinct is to just try to find the quickest way out of the dark forest, to try to escape all of the painful feelings and to make them go away. But oftentimes that's not possible. And when we try to make these painful feelings just go away, it often will result in behaviors like avoidance or anger. Um, So, in other words, as we're trying to escape the pain, we often end up leading to more pain for ourselves. So, if we can't just escape this pain, if we can't just make it go away, what can we do? Okay, so let's start by just trying on a different lens and considering what looks different about this forest from the one we just looked at. All of the same emotions are there, but they're not quite as big or as imposing or scary. They're just a part of the forest, kind of like leaves on the trees. So, if we can focus a little bit more on how we can walk through the forest rather than on finding an exit, we can reframe these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings so that they have a little bit less power over us. So, in other words, our goal is to find a way to walk through the forest of difficult or uncomfortable thoughts and feelings while still finding ways to enjoy our life. Um, so walking through the forest instead of trying to, run out of it, make it go away, means that we're coming face to face with all of the trees. So when that comes to a dementia diagnosis or other difficult challenges, we are talking about facing some really big emotions. And just like you might run into obstacles on a walk in the forest, whether it's bad weather, bugs, or crossing a creek, there's going to be emotional obstacles on your journey. That said, there are tools you can develop that will help you actually enjoy the walk in the forest, while being better prepared for the obstacles you'll encounter. So, in navigating through a forest, having a compass can make a really big difference. And just like a physical compass can guide us through a forest, and we can use a mental compass to guide us through difficult times. And so, even if you can't escape uncertainty, whether that's a dementia diagnosis or a different challenge, you can use your personal compass to help you get back on your chosen path. So, let's move on and kind of try to identify what is on your personal compass because all of our compasses they're going to look different from the people around us. Um, and this compass is going to help guide us through the compass that will help guide you through these difficult thoughts and feelings is going to be our values. Before we get into defining and identifying values, I want to emphasize that I'm not talking about religious or societal values. I'm talking about the things that matter most to you personally. So, to illustrate this briefly, I want you to think about for a moment about why different people feel such different emotions. Um, and one of the reasons is that we tend to have strong emotions about the things that we personally care about in life. So, for example, a sports fan is probably going to feel super excited when their favorite team wins, and they might feel devastated, crying and screaming when they lose. But if you're like me, you probably don't care very much about sports, and you might not have any real reaction when the local team wins or loses. But maybe instead you really love a good love story. So you might laugh and cry, be bawling your eyes out at this romantic comedy in a way where someone who doesn't enjoy the love stories as much would just, be looking at you and wondering what's going on there. So obviously, when we're dealing with more serious things, such as a dementia diagnosis, your emotions are going to be more intense than watching a sports game or a romantic movie. But the same idea holds true. Whatever you're feeling tells you about something you care about in life. And that's going to tell you something about where your values are and what values can be on that compass for you. So, personal values aren't always easy to identify. Um, but our emotions, both the comfortable, feel good ones and the more difficult or uncomfortable emotions, can tell us a lot about what we value. So I want to go back to the thought or feeling that you wrote down earlier. And I want you to consider what that thought is telling you. We're going to pause for just a moment so you can ask yourselves about what that thought or emotion is telling you, and you can use these questions on the screen if they're helpful. Um, and the goal here is to try to make this connection between what you are feeling and the value that is reflected by that feeling. So I'm going to be quiet for a moment and give you a little bit, about 30 seconds to a minute to just think again. All right, you may still be thinking, or you may also be feeling a little stumped. So I'm going to put this example from the program up here for you to see how Linda, one of the hypothetical characters we get to know in the Compassion Compass program, uses her thoughts and feelings to identify what she values. Okay. And if you're still struggling with connecting your emotions to your values, you can also use this list here to help you think of or label one or two values that might reflect why you feel that emotion or have that thought. And they don't have to fit perfectly. Just feel free to use this list if it's helpful or to come up with your own. All right. So our emotions reflect our personal values. And they can help us identify those values. Or maybe even if you already feel very aware of what your personal values are, difficult emotions can make it a lot harder to live aligned with those values. This can be especially true when it feels like you might be losing parts of yourself or you are mourning how life used to be, which is very common for individuals facing dementia diagnosis or cognitive decline. That said, it is still possible to step towards meaning, fulfillment, and connection. It's all about what we do with these emotions, so that they don't get in the way of living according to our personal values. And if there's one thing that we've learned in all the work that we've done in this area, it's that our first instinct is to try to push away these bad feelings. Um, but and that might be kind of going back to that forest analogy, right? To just try to run as fast as you can, as far as you can to try to get out of the forest. But instead of getting you out of the forest, oftentimes this just gets you further off of your path, gets you a little bit more lost in that forest. So instead, we're going to work on some skills to help us walk with the emotions instead of trying to push them away. And one of the best ways that we can do it, and the skill we're going to touch on today, is by responding to these emotions and treating yourself with compassion. All right, so how do you respond to emotions with compassion? Here on the screen, I have a few things that we can try to do. First, you can start with just telling yourself that you did choose to have those difficult feelings. Um, and then is also, taking a step to recognize that you can have these feelings without them causing you harm. Um, and then also being gentle and forgiving with yourself when you feel overwhelmed by these emotions. These things, and maybe that last one in particular, are a lot easier said than done. So to practice this, I want you to picture someone that you care about deeply. Could be a family member, a friend, or even a pet. And now I want you to imagine yourself back in that forest. And as you're walking through the forest, you come across this person that you care deeply about, and they are lost, and they need help. They've been lost in the forest for a long time, and they seem tired and helpless. So now imagine you're slowly walking up to them. What would you do for this person that you care about? Would you ask them what they need? Or maybe if it was cold and rainy, would you offer them your own coat? Do you share your water with them if they were thirsty? Would you take care of them, hold their hand, let them know that you are there for them? Every one of these is an example of compassion. And all we mean by self-compassion is treating yourself the same way you would treat someone who you care deeply for. So here's a brief example from the program of how Linda started responding to herself with compassion. So, although Linda sometimes felt embarrassed about her challenges and worried about how she was changing, she chose to keep making plans with family and friends. When she felt a strong sense of, when she felt a strong feeling of shame, she practiced treating it with care and compassion. This helped Linda feel more comfortable being herself around others, while also giving her opportunities to relax and have fun. So, with that, I want you to take a minute to go back to that thought or feeling that you wrote down earlier and ask yourself, how can you respond to that with a little bit more compassion or kindness for yourself? And if you still have that pen out, or you can type it into your phone, maybe take a minute to just write down that goal of how you can respond to that thought or feeling with a little bit more kindness. All right. Hopefully, walking through that exercise gave you all a little bit of insight into what the Compassion Compass covers. And maybe it can even hopefully help you moving forward the next time you are feeling overwhelmed or stuck in a dark forest of difficult emotions. Um, Now we're going to transition a little bit, and I and my colleague Gavin are going to cover a little of the research on the Compassion Compass program, including what some of our participants have said about this program. And I just want to start by emphasizing how important this research is to us, as it gives us an opportunity to listen to the lived experiences of individuals with dementia so that we can adapt the program to better meet their needs. This whole program was developed based on the feedback we received from individuals living with dementia as well as their caregivers. Um, Back to what I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of them have mentioned that there is just a lack of emotional support following receiving a dementia diagnosis. Um, and that is what we developed this program to help address that need. So, starting off, let's see. I don't know why this isn't clicking forward for me. Give me a sec. Here we go. Okay, so starting off, we did a trial where we had 17 individuals with dementia do the program, and they gave us feedback on it. And that feedback showed it was really exciting to see that this program was both helpful and impactful for the individuals who participated. Um, so we received a lot of positive feedback from this group about just their overall satisfaction with the program. So we have this system usability scale where it's a score out of 100. And typically, if it's above 70, that means that the program is doing a pretty good job, that most people like it. And we got an 84 on among these 17 people who took it. So that shows us that overall, things with this program worked really well. And then we also did interviews with all the participants who completed the program, and we got a lot of great feedback there. So I have a couple short quotes up here on the screen where we had a participant who shared it wasn't like a chore to do the program, if that makes sense. It was just pleasant, which is great to hear because we never want to feel like we're burdening, people by saying, "Hey, here's one more thing to do. Complete this program." And so that type of feedback is really meaningful. And similarly with this next one, someone said, I think it's just like a page turner because I'm like, what's it going to tell me to do next? And then this last one I really, really love. They say, don't stop with this, referring to the program. Don't stop, developing this program and getting this program to people. This is nice. I like it. I wish I didn't have this disease to get to you guys, but thank you. So in short, the feedback we got showed us, a few opportunities for improvement, and ultimately that's worth growing this program, and distributing it to more people. So, in a few minutes, my colleague Gavin is going to share a little bit more about how we've grown this program to include caregivers. But we're also going to be doing a much larger study with this program in the coming months. Um, and at the end of today, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, including an email address that you can reach out to if you would like to be notified of when you or a loved one could join the next trial of this program. Before we get there, I'm going to quickly highlight a few more things from the interviews that our participants have shared. We got to hear a lot of really neat stories that illustrated how the program helped individuals to develop some of those skills that make up the psychological flexibility that I talked about at the beginning. Um, so, First, we saw a lot of people report increases in their emotional awareness and their ability to just sit with difficult or uncomfortable emotions. One individual said, I was able to find feelings that I was having that I hadn't even acknowledged or tried to find the names for yet. So, like frustrated, yes. Anxious, yes. And dread was one of them. It also helped me name some of the feelings that I had, but I hadn't even had in the forefront of my mind. So, more emotional awareness. We also had a number of participants who reported having some really meaningful breakthroughs as they were able to reframe and reconceptualize their dementia diagnosis. So one individual said, it helped me see a hope-filled future, not in the sense that this is ever going to go away, but in the sense that as this progresses, I have the tools to deal with it for now. It gave me a sense of confidence that while I'm in over my head, I can jump up and down and get my head over water sometimes and get a deep breath. And then, aligned with the title and the goals of this program, participants also shared a number of ways that treating themselves more compassionately helped them and really resonated with them. One individual said, I can't tell you how impactful this was. I've had therapists tell it to me before, and it has never sunk in. But the way the program presented, the how would you feel if somebody was feeling these things? What would you do? And then talked about being as gentle with yourself as you would be with other people. I don't tend to be gentle with myself, and hearing that, it really sunk in and has made my life a whole lot calmer. All right. And then last, a lot of participants reported that they were able to find more meaning in their lives by using their values as their compass. And for example, one individual said, now that I'm not fighting, I can just relax and make sure I'm doing the things that I want to do. Make sure I'm spending time with the people I want to spend time with and write letters that I want to write. Instead of fighting, I can do the things that are important because the fighting was just taking up time that I didn't have anyways. All right. I just want to express my gratitude for the individuals who did these interviews with us. Just reading these stories is very impactful. I hope some of you are able to feel this as well. And it was just doing these interviews, listening to them. It was a very emotional experience to hear these stories. And I'm just really grateful for the participants and their time and their vulnerability in sharing these experiences with us. Um, all right, so everything that we've covered today has focused on Compassion Compass for individuals with dementia. But one of the challenges that we did encounter initially in doing this first study was disseminating the program, finding and connecting with individuals living with dementia who wanted to take the program. And then we also got feedback from a number of our participants that they would like a little bit more support in completing the program. So, taking this together, we did another small study where we had individuals with dementia complete the program along with their caregivers. And so, I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague Gavin, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what we found in that study.
Yeah, hi. I over the last little bit have had the privilege of doing the same type of interviews and interacting with caregivers and individuals who have been diagnosed with dementia. And so I don't have as many great quotes as Heather does yet because we're still kind of combing through the data. Um, but there were some cool numbers and different things that I think we can dive into. So Heather, I don't know if I can advance the slide. Okay. So the way that we were measuring some of this is Heather talked about the system usability scale, and that's kind of the big thing I'm going to talk about is how acceptable was it for not only the individuals with dementia, which you saw, but also for the caregivers. So the way that we did it was um, we had them complete the program. And then we had them complete some surveys, and then we did an interview with them, and then we followed up with some surveys later. Okay. Um, so overall, we did see high program acceptability, much like in the first iteration that we did. Individuals with dementia scored 73.25 out of 100, and caregivers had a little bit higher with an 86.8. So we see high acceptability not only with the individuals with dementia in this second iteration, but also now with their caregivers, which is really encouraging. Um, and overall, the feedback we got was positive, and some of the key points that we saw was that caregivers and individuals who have been diagnosed liked the flexibility, the accessibility of doing it on their own. It wasn't as intimidating or overwhelming because they were able to kind of learn at their own pace and do it when they felt the best to do it. The asynchronous nature, not having to do it with other people, was convenient, and then allowing them to kind of thoroughly reflect on their answers, looking at it again at a later point or trying to complete the program again later was good for them as well. Um, so here we can kind of see some of the differences in what people were thinking about it. So one caregiver said, and caregivers, we have weird schedules because I'm also full time working full time. So I could do it on my lunch hour at work, or if I'm on the bus on my way to work, I can pull up the website. Love it. One individual with dementia said, I could relax and examine the questions thoroughly and think about them and then respond accordingly most accurately. So you can kind of see how this is reinforcing the different types of positives that we were seeing. Um, so one other thing that we heard from both caregivers and people with a diagnosis was that they really liked the visuals, the act elements, and they felt understood and seen. A lot of these vignettes were different examples of people as they were going through the program. They got to read different experiences, and it was enlightening to these individuals to not just see that they were the only ones going through this, that these emotions were unique to them, but in fact, other people were going through it as well. And so, one of the underlying things that we see is that they feel seen and they feel understood. So to kind of reinforce that, one caregiver said, I like the examples of the people. Giving an example of what that emotion or whatever might be, those were helpful. And then one individual with dementia said, I didn't have a moment of checking out because I'm so fascinated by the content. It's so relevant. And the visuals engage me. I'm an auditory and a visual learner. So, like I said, I've had just over the last few months the privilege of getting to speak with these individuals and seeing the impact that this program has had. Getting to listen to their stories has been awesome. So,
Thanks so much, Gavin. Um, all right. Okay, sometimes it seems to get stuck. These are just our references. Um, so next though, as we finish up today and before we transition into the Q&A, it would be so helpful if you would all complete this brief 1-minute survey.